Get your calendars out. February 17th, February 18th, live trading, San Diego. We got the Lowe's Coronado. I mean, what else would you want? This event is limited to 50 people. Look at your calendar, clear it, make sure you show up. If you want to be a rebel, this is the place to be. You got to sign up for it now. Giddy up, baby.
You know, John, we always got to be careful. First of all, that is classic, and it's good that you finally got it back because a lot of people have been asking. I mean, guys on Twitter, guys on Margaret Rebellion, guys everywhere, wherever this is seen, YouTube, yep. They all are like, well, where the hell did that go? Where'd the clapper go? But you got to be careful of one thing, John, and I do. I more than you because it was me. I'm looking at that promo for San Diego. That shirt of mine, I got to tell you, I'm not so sure that way. If I could pick it again, I might. That's Dad's old shirt, his Hawaiian shirt, and the thing looks, you know, I might have gone with another one. I don't know if it'd be this one either. I mean, you know, but we have to think about those things.
Well, it's for comfort, though, Pete.
Yeah, that's true.
Like if you're somebody who does come to that San Diego event, folks. And I think it's like the 16th through the 18th, something like that of February. Mm-hmm. So it's more than a month out, plenty of time to get a nice airfare or just drive down if you're, depending where you're living in California. Yeah. But, you know, it's 2 days of live trading and it's comfortable. It's not a bunch of guys sitting around in suits or a bunch of ladies that are, you know, worried about what they look like. It's like everybody gets up early, especially in California. Those of you on the West Coast already know that. Shoot, you start trading at 6:30 in the morning, not 9:30 like the East Coast or 10:30 like when I'm in Puerto Rico, Pete. That's the best time of the year for me.
You could do a whole day before the day even starts.
I do. I mean, I go out and I hit the hill of death, at like 6:45 in the morning, usually, Pete. By then, I've already done a little trading if there's some pre-market activity. And by the time I'm back, it's 8 o'clock Puerto Rico time. 8 o'clock Puerto Rico time.
You got 2.5 hours.
6 o'clock Central time. So I've still got 2.5 hours before the day kicks off.
You know, I didn't know, John. I didn't know you traded as much. I don't do much in the pre-market at all. And I'm not saying that's a smart thing or a bad thing. It's just I don't find myself doing that very often. But so kudos for you for being alert enough to be able to do that. Usually, especially if it's been a tequila night for me, that might be a little bit too quick.
That might be a little quick in that case.
Yeah.
But folks, you're tuned into the Rebel's Edge. Pete Najarian and I are welcoming you and happy to have Nick Hill running the board today. Jared is off. God knows what he's doing, Pete.
Slacker.
But we're counting on you, Nick Hill. And he is good. Nick Hill has done a great job with it. And he and Jared both are the producers of this show. So let's get started with Macro Minute, Pete. 1 minute, that's all we give it. So 1 minute of macro, I'm going to say the markets are still holding on to most of the gains that they made, not just Friday, but this morning, Pete. The exception is the Dow, but the S&P and NASDAQ both jumped on the opening and are holding on to those gains right now at mid-session.
Yep. And I would say, John, keep an eye on the dollar. We've talked about that in the past as well when you're talking macro and macro only. And I'll be really brief. The dollar was 105. It closed underneath 104 on Friday. We were up 700 points. Today, we started the day about 104. We got underneath 103. We've been up as much as 300 points. When we see the macro side of things with the dollar getting hit, when it's getting hit, the markets are usually going to the upside. Keep an eye on that dollar. It's going to be a great sort of like a lightning rod of something that kind of can give you a little bit of an insight on the markets.
Well, we have also, Pete, seen a little, to start with our first stock, Macy's, There was some put activity. There was nervousness about what they might say about how the holiday shopping quarter finished up. Obviously, Macy's one of the biggest retailers out there with all the brands that Lundgren stuck under this brand, Pete, Macy's, Bloomingdale's, and a whole bunch of others, Marshall Fields and so forth. That stock trading to the downside today by a full 7%. They see sales coming in at the low end to the midpoint of their previous guidance, roughly 8.1 billion. And that's not exactly bullish. It's about 50 cents off the bottom that it hit today, which was $20.
Yeah, it's been under pressure, John. Like you said, I mean, as soon as they released that and they talked about lower sales, they're not getting hit on inventory, which I guess is a good thing. But the reality is, you don't need to see something like this. And you know what? Is it something to do with the reacceleration of the consumer and where they're spending? And apparently maybe Macy's is not where they're doing some of that spending. If they are, John, that's a bit of an issue. And because of that, they didn't say anything about the earnings, though. They were just talking about sales. So this is a name that has a huge short interest. We've talked about that for years. They got, their cash to debt, John, is a negative $6 billion. So between that and the short side of things, that can actually sometimes work in your favor to the upside with the short interest when they squeeze. But otherwise, there's still a lot of folks out there betting against Macy's as a company that's going to have success into the future.
Yeah. And they're not the only retailer, by the way, folks. Pete and I have talked about a number of them, like Kohl's, where we've seen unusual activity. But Lulu, this is one that I know you love, Pete, but I had to point out that for one of the first times, they're actually cutting prices. And that's how they moved more inventory. In other words, they got more sales, but the profit margin shrunk. Their gross profit shrunk. And that's one of the things you sort of worry about, because on the high end, this was $410. It traded down pretty hard. On this news, it was down better than 11 or almost 12%. It's rallied back to be down about 8.5%. What's your take on one of your favorite athleisure stocks?
I'm looking at it as an opportunity, John, because I think you were going into the holidays. People were obviously they were trying to do their best to figure out how they could stretch their dollars. Everybody was worried about inflation and everything else. So with that as a backdrop, let's also remember this. For the calendar year of 2022, John, the stock was almost virtually unchanged. Now, how many stocks can we even say that about? And I'm not, it's not like they skyrocketed to the upside, but they did not get sold off. Why is that? Because it's a quality brand. They continue to grow. The margins, yes, they're going to be a little bit squeezed this go around. I'm actually looking at this as a bit of an opportunity, John, because occasionally you and I both have the same sort of a strategy where on a pullback, if you really like it, and unless you think something really dramatic is going to occur for a long period of time, which I don't, I think it might be an opportunity to add to it. That's something I'm considering today. I have not made any moves just yet, but with the stock that came down $26 on the low, I'm okay just kind of keeping a very close eye on it to see how does it trade the rest of the day. And by the end of the day, I most likely will add something into this name.
Pete, October 14th, it hit the same low that it hit earlier today, believe it or not, because like I said, on the lows today, it was 289. It hit almost exactly that same spot today as October 14th. So, some people would look at that. I'm not the big technician, but some people would look at that and say, hey, we rallied some, $12 or $13 off of that low. Maybe that is a support level, Pete, for the stock for more than just a hot second. Right. All right. How about Teledoc? This one up 10%. The shares bounced off the 52-week low that they hit just one day ago, last Friday. They hit a new 52-week low. They're rallying today because they said in a securities filing that they narrowed revenue, in other words, sales guidance, and they're going to be speaking at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. Is this one worth a shot after that brutal sell-off that TDOC experienced, Pete?
Yeah, here's the biggest problem I have, and I know you know exactly the words that are going to come out of my mouth because
Yeah.
it happens a lot, but it's how I view the markets, John. And I look at this company. When the hell are you going to make money? Are you ever going to make money? We've been wondering for a long time. It's a really cool company. They did something that was really, we had to have it, right, during the pandemic. Do we have to have them now? Do we want to have them now? Are they going to be able to ever show us some profits? At some point, John, they have to, in my opinion. That's why I think the stock got sold off as much as it did. That's also the reason why there's a short interest of anywhere between 17 and 20%. So for those reasons, that's probably a little bit of a squeeze going on today. That stock was up 6%. Now it's up 10%. Feels like a squeeze to me. But as you know, John, I do not like these companies that have been public for a number of years and cannot figure out a way to make money. They couldn't figure out a way to make money during the pandemic. That's a problem. I mean, we don't have to have Teledoc now. It's great. It's like Zoom. It's like a lot of things that we all started to migrate to. But do we have to have Teledoc now? Or do you want to go, when you go to the doctor, do you want to look him or her right in the eyes and say, all right, how am I, doc?
Well, and Pete's right. This one was public, folks. Basically, I think, Pete, in mid 2015 or maybe 2016, I don't have the exact date, but it came public and it was right around where it is now. Let's say 20 some odd dollars. It went all the way to $300 in the midst of that pandemic, where, I'm looking at basically February, Pete, of 2021. It was $300. It was $21 on Friday. So again, that's one of those things where, yeah, you gave them a lot of credit during the pandemic when people couldn't get in to see doctors, but they wanted some opinion. Now, just like working out, and I know you say that all the time, Pete, but people don't want to just sit there on their Peloton. They want to go into a class and look into the eyes of that instructor for the Peloton, or, their spin cycle and all that kind of stuff, whatever one we're talking about. I think the same thing with doctors. I want to go in and see the doctor. I just don't want to go online. So I think this one is likely to get a squeeze, could even go further. Again, JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, a lot of stuff comes out during that conference. Keep an eye on it, and keep an eye on this one, Pete. Exact Sciences.
Well, the last thing, John, just let me add this real quick. When you finish up with Teledoc, and you brought it up, but I got to bring it up as well. That was the Peloton bubble. Everybody who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, the most expensive clothes hanger, yeah, take a look at where that piece of crap is now. It's a great company, but nobody needs to do that. And so it's a matter of need. So the need was there for Teledoc. Need was there for Peloton. The need still is there to some degree for Uber, but they can't make a damn dime either. So those are always problems, John. When you've got companies that can't make money, that's an issue.
Well, I doubt if we're going to get sponsorship from Peloton or from Teledoc after that, but maybe we can still get a sponsorship out of Uber.
We'll go to Lifetime or somebody. We'll go to somebody real that really matters. Maybe it's Lifetime. Maybe it's Planet Fitness, whatever, because those other things are just not what the world wants.
Yep. Well, Exact Sciences. This one, Pete, up a big 21% today. EXAS, cancer testing company. Some people, crude people, call it turd in a box, because literally what they're doing is they're sending in fecal matter in a box to Exact Sciences, and they can run some tests on it through Cologuard, that's what they call it, to determine whether or not there's a likelihood that there's some issue with something inside of you that just came out of you.
Sounds like a bad New Year's Eve party. Anyway, John, so here's the thing, though. I love this company. I think they are amazing. And the one area that I always look at where I say, you know what, I give them a little bit of grace is these guys don't make money either. That's a problem. But they also, with the kind of numbers that they're starting to generate, John, and this is not just a stay-at-home stock. This is not just all those kinds of things. But this is for people that are out there and they're trying to find the best way diagnostically to get something that's probably an uncomfortable thing to walk in the office and do. This makes a heck of a lot of sense. So their revenue is supposed to be, it's up 28%, John. Their sales look like they're going to be up 40%. There's a lot of good things happening here for this company. And when we talk about biotech and we talk about names like this in the medical field, I put that into a different category. Teledoc, you know what? You can visit a doctor. This one, you don't necessarily want to visit the doctor. And if you can do the poop in the box deal, that's a lot easier. And you know what? A lot of people would rather do something like that than go in there and start saying, well, Dr. Jellyfinger, what do you think? You know, I mean, that's that's not something you and I are all that really interested in, right?
No, most people aren't.
Right.
But
Most.
they do. It is something, on the other hand, that Pete and I both know, since Dad was a doctor, Mom was a nurse, Pete was pre-med. It is important to get diagnostic work done, folks. So even though we're making a joke about parts of this, this is something that really can help people, especially if they have a little trepidation about going into the doc, at least staying on top of it, because it's a lot easier to treat things like colorectal cancer that's very treatable if you get it early rather than coming in late. But this one, Pete, it looks like, what was it? December of 2018. It was at this same $56 mark. Also, there's another spot on the chart where it looks like 56, right where we are now. We break through this, I think we could be off to the races. But look for some resistance first. Maybe we break through and come right back down, and then we reverse and go up. So I'll be looking for some unusual activity to hit eventually in this one, Pete.
Yeah.
All right. Let me tell you about this one. IWM. This is where Pete and I give you what is hit on our heat seeker, which is our unusual activity scanner. And in this case, a huge trade went off, Pete, almost 50,000 options, which is 5 million share equivalent. They're buying puts. They're buying the February 171 puts with the IWM trading at about 179.40 in rough terms. So they're betting that this thing has another leg lower. And if that's the case, they're going to make a lot of money because they got 5 million shares short. If this thing starts dropping, volatility goes up, they can make it on both sides, Pete. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with you, John. I think that one's really, it's interesting, you know, and we've seen a lot of various ETF activity over the last little while. Ironically, a lot of the ETF activity that we're seeing actually is going out in time a little bit further out than some of the other tradings. And I got a short-termer for you right now. Occidental. This is a name that everybody knows because of the fact that we know Warren Buffett was such an aggressive man in purchasing this name. Well, it's still hanging in there. It's off of the highs for sure. The highs were up around 77. Today it was trading around 66. It's a little bit lower now. So these options have even got a little bit cheaper. But at the time of this trade, the stock was trading right around 66. There was a buyer at 12,500 of Friday's expiring 68 calls. So at the time, about $2 away. Now it's about $3 away, or maybe even a little bit more than that. But the nice thing is, John, these are about 36 cents up to about 65 cents. That's what they were paying. Stock has come in a little bit. These options have come down a little bit. So the opportunity this time is you're not having to chase it. And I like what we're seeing here, John. I think there's a great opportunity to see some of the energy names start to move again. Will they move this week? I don't know. But the reality is somebody thinks that at least Oxy is going to move to the upside. We'll see exactly how this plays out. I like seeing it. You and I saw a lot of different paper today already in other areas. Semiconductors, we'll give you a little hint, wink, wink. But Occidental is one that I think is always worthwhile when we see the unusual options buy.
Yep. And it could be that somebody got a whiff that Warren or somebody big was buying some stock on the dip, like you said, from the 70s down here into the 60s. And maybe they just figured, well, I'll take a controlled amount of risk. They didn't spend a lot of money when they're paying basically 50 cents for some options. So you keep in mind, every option's for 100 shares as always, folks. So that means that a 50-cent option is $50. You want 10 of them? That's a $500 bet that could easily go to $1,000 or $2,000 on just a quick pop out of the stock. We don't even have to get to 68 to have that happen.
Mhm.
All right. Well, gosh, there was a lot of sports, Pete, over the weekend because, we had pro football all weekend long, and some of the games were pretty darned interesting. But I know you want to talk about the title game tonight
Yeah.
between Georgia and TCU first.
Well, I'll ask you real quick first off. Do you like the title game being on this Monday night, John? Or are you a guy who's kind of old school who likes to see a Saturday college football game? Or what do you think as far as like this championship, which will change in a couple of years when they go to 12? But what do you think about this? Do you like the Monday night deal?
I don't mind it. Yeah, I'm used to seeing college games on Saturday like everybody else, but we all know once the season's over and it's all just bowl games, even if it's leading up to a championship, pros starts playing on Saturday. Up until then, they don't, because out of respect for the college game, which feeds them, they basically don't play on Saturdays except when the regular season ends for college. So I don't mind them showcasing it, Pete, just like they do with March Madness and the title game. It's always on that Monday night. So I don't mind it. I think it really puts the focus on the Georgia team, which is going for back-to-back. In other words, they're going for a repeat. And obviously, given the betting line, they're likely to do it.
Yeah, everybody seems to like them, John. Here's the one thing I've got for you. There have been a couple of games this year where Georgia has struggled. And we don't have to go back too far against Ohio State. By the way, Ohio State put up 530 yards on arguably one of the best defenses in the country, right? And 41 points. And Stetson Bennett is a guy who's always overlooked. He'll always be overlooked. He doesn't look that great because he's smaller, John, and all the rest of this. But all he does is produce, right? I mean, the guy is absolutely – the players there love him. They think the world of him. He spreads the ball around to everybody else. 25 years old. It's kind of an interesting thing that this guy, he started at Georgia. He went to JC, came back to Georgia, and now he's absolutely cruising. He's got Brock Bowers, the tight end. But John, I love Max Duggan, and here's why. The guy stayed at TCU. He went through some good and bad times, some very bad times. And this year, the guy had an unbelievable year. They're supposed to get crushed by Michigan. They actually end up beating Michigan. Great game. The kid had the worst game of the year in that game. I don't think he's going to do that twice, one back-to-back. If he has a good game, John, and that running game that they've got there, because they've got some horses that can run the ball, even with an injury right now, including Duggan himself, I'm kind of leaning towards the underdog right now. I think TCU is going to actually shock them and maybe most likely even win under the right circumstances, just because of what we've seen this year and how unbelievably they just don't ever quit and they're always in the game. What do you think?
Well, it was certainly impressive against Michigan, and there were a lot of penalties in that game, Pete.
Yeah.
So, penalties are almost like these, losing the ball through a turnover, whether it's a fumble or whether it's an interception. You get enough of those, and it's really tough to win. So if Georgia plays clean, then it's going to be really tough on TCU. If Georgia has anybody getting hot-headed or has anybody throwing interceptions, like you said, unlikely. But if that happens, I think TCU's got a shot. But I really do think it's going to take that. It certainly took that against Michigan. And there were penalties on both teams in Michigan. There were a lot of penalties. So I'm not saying they won it strictly on penalties. But if Georgia plays Georgia football, I don't think TCU can stay with them, Pete.
Yeah, I think you're overwhelmed. You're with the crowd too, because I think everybody's looking at it. You just mentioned the betting lines. That's what they're saying as well. So next, John, we're going to jump to the NFL, but we're going to do two of them. So we get a little bonus today. But the first one's going to be this: the hot seat just got a hell of a lot hotter. There are guys getting fired, and you know what? It started early this year, John. We had some guys. Matt Rule got rid of him early. Our buddy David Tepper said, you know what? We're only a few weeks into the season. You're out. And he's got all the money in the world, so he can do whatever he wants. He's paying him like $6-7 million. even though he's going to Nebraska and is at Nebraska now as their coach. Frank Reich, Indianapolis, he got fired in week 9. Likely that I was looking at some of the likely contributors that were going to get fired. Well, they got fired between the time I sent my notes to now, John, because Lovie Smith at Houston, 1 year, you're out, Lovie. Sorry. But the jig is up. It's just not, it didn't work. They were terrible. They absolutely were terrible on offense. They were terrible on defense. They had nothing. And you know what? He's a defensive guy. The defense was terrible. Then you look at Arizona. Looks like Kingsbury's out. They just redid his contract like last year, and here he is getting fired again. I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa was also another name out there where we might see a coaching change there, John, as well. But the one that sticks out, how about the Denver Broncos, Nathaniel Hackett? Now, he led the charge on March 8th to trade for Russell, right? He goes, hey, man, we're gonna do this. We're going to do this Herschel Walker 2.0. Well, not only did it not work and wasn't it a total failure, and they gave 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, 2 former first-rounders, and a defensive tackle away, they may have helped Seattle actually get into the playoffs this year with what they did. I mean, think about that. In 1 year, how much can change for that team because of the draft and the players that they gave them and everything else. And I got to think Pete Carroll right now is sitting there, despite the fact that he's 75. He probably feels like he's 35, John, because he's looking around going, you know what? We're going to the playoffs. He's probably chewing on 15 pieces of gum right now, and he's just laughing it up because he's looking at Denver, and Denver's got to figure out, well, who do we hire? All these teams, each and every year, there's about 7 teams, it seems like, every year in the NFL or more that are looking for a new coach. So there's a lot of names that are already being tossed around out there, John. But what did you think about just what's the best job is the one I should say to you of all these jobs, Carolina and Indianapolis and Houston and Arizona, and maybe Cleveland, maybe Tampa, which one's the best?
Well, it's impossible for me to say Denver, Pete, because unfortunately, Russell Wilson just has outstayed his welcome in the league. Yeah. Apparently, because his numbers were horrific this year. Yeah. So I would be willing to go with them if it wasn't for Russell Wilson. And that's a guy that I used to love. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I think expiration date really hit on him, and he's no longer got it. Of that group, I guess I got to go with Houston, Pete, would be one of the teams that I would like if I was taken over, because the bar is extremely low. Mm-hmm. I'm not saddled with Russell and losing all those draft picks, which, right, like I say, is impossible to take. And, I think that Campbell did your friend Pete Carroll, because Pete's a personal friend of Pete Carroll. And I think he did him the biggest favor in the world. Those guys played like it was their lives on the line. Yep. Against Green Bay, Pete. And Green Bay played like absolute dog crap against them. They did. Yeah. And Green Bay did as well as they could do, Pete. But, I got to put them in the pretender category. Yeah, they beat the Vikings a week ago and made them look bad. But, I think that if of all those teams, I would either go with I'm going to stick with Houston. I'd go with the Houston Texans as far as where I would like to be coaching next year.
Yep. I would agree with you. I think they have some great opportunities, John, and they've got some players, but obviously quarterback is a major issue for them. So let's just update real quick for everybody. John and I had our top 5 picks for the NFL draft. They've shifted around because now the Bears get the number 1 pick. I still think the Bears go with Will Anderson. I still think Houston takes Stroud from Ohio State. The Arizona Cardinals are going to take Paris Johnson. I think the Colts get Bryce Young. A lot of people have him going in front of Stroud. I don't. He's too small. And then I like Jalen Carter, the defensive lineman for Seattle. I think that's the order. And it didn't change at all other than where the teams are picking themselves. But I think it's the same 5 guys at the same 5 teams. And we're going to be updating this, folks. John and I have got a lot of fun things. I might even be, John, at the combines this year. I've been invited to go. So
Nice.
I may go there. So that should be kind of fun as well if I do that. But it's going to be interesting. And maybe we expand it from 5 to 10. Who knows? But there's going to be a lot of trades. There's going to be a lot of free agency. And because of that, with new coaches, we're going to have to update this probably once a week or so at least.
Exactly. Well, let me throw out quickly, Pete, that third thing that you said, the bonus, which is the pretenders. And oh my God, these two teams are absolute pretenders. You know, the Packers didn't make it, sadly, because Aaron is a friend of Pete's and mine. But I will say that the Vikings and the Cowboys are both pretenders. The Vikings because they have no defense at all. The Cowboys because they've got Dak Prescott. You know, some people love Dak. I think he's a good man, but I do not love him as far as how he has played when games are on the line that he needs to win here, Pete. I don't like that. You know, yeah, they crushed the Vikings. Who knows? If these two played each other again, the Vikings could easily beat them because it just depends on what team shows up because they're both pretenders. They don't have the total package. Neither team does. So I think both of those two teams, the Vikings, you know, whatever, 13-4, pretenders. The Cowboys, did you see that against the freaking Commanders yesterday, Pete? That was terrible. Just terrible. They're limping into the playoffs.
Well, I don't disagree with you, John. And here's the way I'd frame both those two teams. And, you know, I'm near and dear to the Vikings. I played for the Vikings long ago, and I do a radio show, a sports show, The Huddle, up in Minnesota. So, you know, I'm very close to the team. I see a lot of the things. But I said this, John, right away. They hired a coach that decided on the defensive side, you know what? I don't like this 4-3 defense. We're going to go to a 3-4 defense, and we're going to make our two defensive ends stand up and play outside linebacker. That'd be great if they've ever done this in their history of their lives, but they didn't. So you're taking great players and changing who they are and what they are. So when you look at the Minnesota Vikings, the biggest problem, John, defense. Our offense is unbelievable. We can score on anybody at any time, even with some of the injuries that we've had. And we've had a lot of them this year on the offensive line. But our defense can't stop anybody. They're number 31 in just about every category of 32 teams. That's how bad the defense is. You go to the flip side of that, the Dallas Cowboys. Boy, that defense is unbelievable. They got sacks everywhere. They've got arguably the best outside linebacker in the game these days. Everybody compares him to Lawrence Taylor. Don't ever do that. There's no such thing. But he's a damn good player, right? He can play. This guy's an unbelievable guy. But you know what? Their defense is great. Offense, well, not so great. You know, Dak's thrown more interceptions than any other quarterback this year. That should say something about how his year has gone. So the reality is their offense is the Achilles heel. The Vikings defense is theirs. So there's two teams, like you just said, their records look great, but they're kind of limping in because, you know, you look at teams like Buffalo who have the point differential is a very interesting statistic, John. And when you look at that and you see some of the spreads, some of these teams actually, believe it or not, have more points scored on them than they have scored this year. Now, how do you win 10, 12, 14 games where you can't, you know, it's almost something you can't even fathom. And except you go over and look at Buffalo and you look at Kansas City and you look at Cincinnati, you're seeing teams that offense looks like a great offense, the defense looks like a damn good defense, and they get it done. And that's why those are the teams that I think everybody, San Francisco 49ers, a great example of that. Great defense. They score plenty on offense. And again, Christian McCaffrey, was that the best trade ever? Maybe ever?
It might be because, you know, for a guy, Pete, that, again, you and I talked about it last week, and I talked about the kid out of Georgia that's such a good receiver out of the backfield. Mm-hmm. Christian McCaffrey is not a big dude. He can run the ball, and he can get through a little crease that he gets there. And he can also catch the ball like a wide receiver. I mean, the kid's got great hands. And that's why he was a #1 pick. It's not just his running ability, it's his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And he's one of the best there has ever been at doing that. So you're exactly right. Nobody wants to be the linebacker on that kid.
No.
Because, your first step is, going to be forward. And then you got to get back and get onto that kid, which is going to be tough because he's going to be flying out of the backfield. He doesn't run half speed. That kid's full speed all the time. So I love him. And I think that was a great pickup by San Francisco from Carolina. We'll have to see what Carolina does with the picks that they got for that guy. But I think McCaffrey is very happy to be back in the Bay Area.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, that's going to do it for us today, folks. We went a little long, but we wanted to give you a little more sports today. I'll be back tomorrow from Switzerland, Pete.
Oh, jeez. Oh, God. He's going to have some big Swiss mountain dog running around. He's probably going to have whiskey around his neck or something or whatever.
I hope so. Although it might be tequila. It might be tequila instead of whiskey. Folks, have a great day. Tell your friends about the Rebels Edge. Got some big announcements coming your way soon. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.